All right, as if it weren't tough enough to follow a speaker and a scholar like John, I got 2 hours of material to fit into 15 minutes. So this is going to be interesting. Let me make sure that's on. There we go. I don't know if you need it or not because I usually bellow. Interestingly enough, I also had a lot of the same material. John and I seem to approach this kind of from different angles, different enough that our topics looked fine and different, but they really overlap a lot. But the nice thing is, John touched on a lot of things, and I was prepared to go a little bit deeper into some of those avenues. So, well, he's already. Okay, so that should be plenty. What I'm passing out now is a lot of reference material, and I will apologize. As soon as you get it, you'll know why. When I had it on the computer, it was nice, big font. And then I went to print it out, and I wanted to make it handy, one sheet, and it went microscopic. So I apologize, first of all. Once you get it home and you can mull over it, in depth, you can get your magnifying glass or your readers or whatever. So we'll just go over some stuff quickly here, and I'll say it out loud as well so you can follow along. So my topic, what do you do when tragedy strikes? And tragedy is kind of maybe an inflammatory word there. Bad stuff happens all the time. John was talking about bad stuff happening. And when I think about tragedy and how people react to it and how they react to God in the face of tragedy or adversity or whatever happens, I think of three kind of key points that people think about. First of all, is God causing this tragedy in our lives? Is He accountable that we should blame God for what's going on? Excuse me. Secondly, well, if He didn't cause it, is He allowing it? And why is He allowing that to happen in my life? And then the last point, when we get through that progression, okay, so it's happening, we understand it, yeah, God allowed it, but now what do we do with that? What do we do with this experience that we went through, and how do we apply it to our lives? So to begin with, I want to talk about the cause, and that was, I think, a lot more about what John was talking about. When we look at the cause of bad things in our lives, what is the actual root cause? Okay, what's the thing that actually happens? So you're walking around home, you stub your toe. Not tragedy, but it's sure frustrating, right? What caused it? It's an accident, right? You didn't turn on the light, whatever. Accidents happen. Things are going on all around us. Stuff just happens. It could be coincidental, whatever. Some of those things are caused by stupidity, poor planning, okay? You didn't turn the light on, did you? If you turned the light on, you might have seen the thing that you just stubbed your toe on. So they're kind of self-inflicted wounds at times. Other things are caused by disease. How many of us have never suffered an illness or disease? All right, nobody's that blessed, right? Okay, so it afflicts everybody. But where does all of this come from? And my position is it comes from sin. The culmination of all those things that cause bad stuff to happen is sin. I tie it back to original sin. When original sin occurred, when Adam and Eve were first in the garden and they caused the first sin, what happened? What happened from that point on?
Our relationship with God was broken.
The relationship was broken, and then what physically happened? We got kicked out of the garden and started to die, right? Before that, Adam and Eve were created perfect. They had perfect bodies. God says good, but I think we can consider that perfect. When He created Adam and Eve, they were good. And then they made their choice, they sinned, and they started to die. And at that time, the universe started to die as well. God made the universe and it was good. It was perfect. Man sinned, everything started to go awry. In science, we call that entropy. That's the state of degradation where everything starts to fall apart. And it's a constant flow. There's an opposite thing called enthalpy, right? Right. Where supposedly things grow in order, but that's hypothetical. We don't ever observe that, right? Everything is constantly breaking down. Look at our bodies. Look at the buildings around us. Once you create something to a certain state, it starts to break down. Everything is like that. And so all these other things come from that breakdown. Adam and Eve's brains were perfect, right? They started to deteriorate. Their children's brains were not as perfect as theirs. They started forgetting things. They started making mistakes. We wind up today where we're constantly making mistakes, overlooking things, having accidents that we probably could have avoided, right? Because of that original sin, our bodies are deteriorating on a cellular level. Everything that happens to us is somehow related to our genetic makeup. Mom's going through a search, or she looked at her genetic makeup. She was adopted. She wanted to know what's going on. There's lots of things that we can find from generations past, what diseases that they were susceptible to or whatever, and why we are susceptible to those things now. Because we're constantly degrading. My cancer was not from smoking. I was 6 years old. Most of you know that. I don't think it was from environmental situations where we were around toxic chemicals, right? It's either the environment, which is degrading, or it's my genetic code, which is degrading. Everything around us is falling apart. So everything that's happened, this tragedy in our lives, I believe can be traced back to sin. Don't believe God is inflicting anything on us. We inflicted it on ourselves when he first gave us that choice. And we're continuing to do that. So if we can agree that God doesn't cause the tragedy in our life, we have to look at why does he allow it? Why are bad things allowed to happen to good people? That was one of the points that John made. What reason could God possibly have for allowing these kinds of things in our lives? Why would God let bad things happen to good people? Let me ask you this question. Why would a parent let something bad happen to their child? Those of you who are parents might be able to relate. Those of you who are children might be able to relate as well. Have you ever experienced that where your parent knew, or you were the parent, and you let that kid do what you knew was going to end up in maybe some harm so that they could learn their lesson, so that they could be trained by it, so they could grow? They could be better off in the end. Sometimes we let that happen because we set boundaries and then we walk away. And when we walk away, we either trust that they're going to do what we told them to do, or we know that they're not going to do it, right? So we're kind of in that same position, right? We allow things to happen to people, and we justify it by saying that it's for their own good. So what is that good? What is the lesson to be learned? So when we go through this tragedy, this adversity, what is it that we gain from it? Something that I learned a long time ago from a comedian that some of you may recognize, Mark Lowry. I think he's part of the Gatlin group now, right, Mom? Isn't he part of the Gaither trio or the Gaither group? Yeah. Mark Lowry. Funny guy, pretty good singer. But one of the things that caught me, I was on a cassette tape. That's how long ago it was. I was listening to him on a cassette tape. Luckily, everybody here knows, except for probably those three guys right there, what a cassette tape is. Anyway, he had a bit that he was talking about, and he said, when bad things happen, do you ask God why accusatively, or do you ask him inquisitively? Do you say, God, why did you do this to me? Or why did you let this happen to me? Or do you say, God, what am I to learn from this experience? How am I to get through it and to learn from it and to grow somehow? There's the saying, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Pretty wise, right? You can't grow and get stronger if you're dead. But hopefully you'll learn from it. And if you don't, you'll probably die the next time, right? So there's a learning process. So, so it's up to us to ask God inquisitively, what is it that I'm supposed to get from this terrible thing that happened in my life? How am I to gain from having cancer and losing a limb? That makes me more relatable to somebody else that has cancer who's going through that, or who had an amputation. I can now counsel that person. I'm in a better position to do that. As a result, because mine is pretty externally obvious, people can come up to me and ask me about what's going on. How'd you lose your leg? Usually it's, what'd you do to yourself? Because they don't realize that I only have one leg and I didn't actually tear it off myself. Side note, it's very interesting how people see what they expect to see, but not what they actually see. Because I tell you, I will walk straight up to people and they'll go, oh, did you hurt yourself skiing? No. Anyway, we have that kind of, shared glance and we go about our business. I give them slack when they're behind the counter or something and they don't really see it. But anyway, it allows me an opportunity to make a conversation. It allows me an opportunity now to have a witness to that person. I lost my leg when I was 6. Oh, that's horrible. How'd you get through it? Through the grace of God. Let me tell you about it. That has now equipped me. I can turn the bad thing into a good thing, or at least an opportunity for a good thing. Hopefully they wind up being good things. So when we understand why God might allow bad things to happen to us, then the next thing is, what do we do with that? How do we turn that into something positive? So we talked about my experience. Everybody's gone through something. Loss of a loved one, okay? You can now help somebody else going through their time. An illness. I made it through. You can too. Let's do this together. Here's what I've learned. Here's the medicines that I've found. Here's the fruits and the vegetables that help me, or whatever. We're able to be in a better position to help everybody else. We always want to look for answers in our own questions of why. We want to look for guidance from God to help us get through that particular situation. If it's particularly long, okay, maybe it's a long road to get through that, and you are needing some refreshing. You need another helping of the Spirit to get you through. What is it that you should be doing in that time to be in the right place, to receive God's Spirit, right? So there's lots of questions that we can be asking, but it shouldn't be, God, why did you do this to me? What can I get from it, Lord? One of my favorite quotes of all time comes from a group called They Might Be Giants. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of them. But they're actually kind of an alternative rock group. That being said, they had a really good song. And the line that I like the most is, the truth is where the sculptor's chisel chipped away the lie. And it really resonates with me on a couple of different levels. First of all, I had some stuff chipped away. Might look a little bit different now. But every day, we are chipped away at. Things happen to us, and we react to them. How we react to them helps mold who we are. It forms us in other people's sight, in their opinions. And we, hopefully, when we respond positively to those things, we become more and more like what God has intended us to be, what His will is for us. As He chips and helps chip away the lie that surrounds us, the lie that is the world and tells us what we should be, He helps reveal the truth of what He really intended us to be. So I think we need to be considering that as all these things come around in our lives. The sheets that I gave you, I was going to go through these and we were going to have discussion groups, but we ran out of time for that. So these are kind of like a little bit cheat sheets. These are things that I just pulled quickly off of the internet. I did just a few Google type searches. And I picked some of the good ones that I thought were applicable. So on the one page you have, does God cause suffering? And there's some supporting verses about how it's not God. Let me read a couple of these real quick. Well, first of all, this is a good one that I always like too. The first one there under God, does God cause suffering? Luke 11 talks about, which of you fathers, if your son asks for a fish, will give him a snake instead? Or if he asks for an egg, will give him a scorpion? If then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give you the Holy Spirit to those who ask him? And then the one below that is very similar to that. Why would God do bad things to us when we ask him for good things? Right? He's a parent. He's the model parent. We parent after him. Are we going to give our kid a snake when they ask for a fish? Maybe fish sticks? No, we're going to want to benefit them. Now, does that mean that we're never going to allow any bad things to happen? No. Some you'll allow to happen. Some you won't be around, okay? You'll allow because of, negligence. You're not there. You trust them to make right decisions, and they don't. So I don't believe that God is causing bad things on purpose just for the sake of suffering, but he may allow things to happen for the sake of learning. The other side there, does God allow suffering? So there's some supporting verses there that talk about that, and again, I apologize that it's so tiny. And then on the back, what do we do next? So what are we supposed to get from this? And we've got plenty of verses that talk about how we have joy in our suffering, how we can get strength from it, how we can go on with hope from our suffering. And so, like I said, it's kind of a little bit of a cheat sheet. Hopefully, if you fold it, it'll kind of fit in your Bible, or fold it again, and it'll fit in a pocket or a purse. And maybe if you're in the kind of position where people maybe are talking to you a lot, you can go through these verses. You can make some of your own notes and explore them further, because some of these are just snippets also. So just use it as a beginner step, and you can dive into it a little bit more deeply. Gain some more wisdom than I'm giving you for sure, and maybe use that as a handy reference if you'd like. It is 2:00. If you would like to stick around and we can maybe share some testimonies and talk about that kind of stuff, then by all means, cool. Otherwise, we'll more or less release you. Andy, do you want to do anything official to release everybody?